Annunciation Radio presents Say Yes to Life with Peter Range, Senior Fellow for Strategic Initiatives at the Center for Christian Virtue.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Say Yes to Life, where we learn to embrace our Catholic faith in the secular world. I'm your host, Peter Range, Senior Fellow for the Center for Christian Virtue, and welcome to show number 466 as we continue the fight for every single human life, born, preborn, and yours in our world today. On today's show, we're excited to welcome Jonathan Culp. Jonathan is the director of the Institute of American Constitutional Thought and Leadership at the University of Toledo, where he also serves as associate professor of politics. And we'll talk on the show today about what the Institute is all about. But Dr. Culp earned his BA from St. John's College in Annapolis and his PhD in political science from Boston College. We won't hold his Jesuit university education against. No, I'm just kidding. I went to John Carroll. But he spent 17 years on the faculty at the University of Dallas, where he won multiple teaching excellence awards and served as chair of the politics department before coming to Toledo to head the Institute. His scholarship focuses on the history of political philosophy from ancient to modern times, and he's published articles on the thought of Plato and David Hume. Gosh, that just makes me afraid of this interview, actually, talking about David Hume. But he is currently at work on a book about George Orwell's political philosophy, in particular on the strengths and weaknesses of his attempt to articulate a secular humanist alternative to totalitarianism. A native of the Pacific Northwest, Jonathan spent over 20 years being regaled by his wife, Natalie, about the charms of Northwest Ohio. Similar to my wife, actually. She grew up on a farm in Wood County, where I currently now live, but he's happy to report that everything she said was true. They and their 6 children moved here this past summer and attend St. Joseph Parish in downtown Toledo. More with John about his life, his work, and the Constitution in just a moment. But first, let's go ahead and take 180 seconds around Ohio and the nation to talk about what's happening in the pro-life movement and the news. First, from the Hill, the Department of Health and Human Services announced Thursday is launching investigations into 13 states for violating a federal health refusal clause and coercing healthcare entities into providing or performing abortion services. HHS officials said the department's Office for Civil Rights will launch investigations into 13 states for allegedly violating the Weldon Amendment, an appropriations provision that states any state or local government that receives federal funds cannot discriminate against any healthcare provider that refuses to cover, pay for, refer, or provide for an abortion. So, we call out the Trump administration whenever they're not taking action on the abortion pill, but we also thank them whenever they take action to make sure that pro-life entities are not discriminated against. All right, secondly, from Cleveland.com, the Ohio House Health Committee advanced legislation Wednesday that seeks to restore the 24-hour waiting period before an abortion procedure, even though that restriction is currently blocked in court. Despite questions about the bill's constitutionality, House Speaker Matt Huffman said he expects the legislation to eventually receive a full House vote. The Share the Health and Empower Women Informed Notices, She Wins Act requires a physician to meet with a pregnant individual at least 24 hours before an abortion occurs to provide informed consent information and establishes civil penalties against a physician who violates the bill. This is really an important time period that a woman has to kind of just think about this decision, realize the medical impacts negatively that could take place if she has an abortion. So we do hope that this passes. Third, purchase your tickets today for Saturday, April 11th for the Center for Christian Virtue's Columbus Gala featuring Scott Jennings. Scott Jennings is a prominent conservative political commentator on CNN, known for his sharp insights and thought-provoking analysis. We got to have Scott here on the show. He's been dubbed the black sheep of CNN, but you can get tickets at ccv.org/Columbus Gala. All right, now it's time for Jonathan Culp, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I should have asked you before the show, but you can correct me. Jonathan is the director of the Institute of American Constitutional Thought and Leadership at the University of Toledo, where he also serves as associate professor of politics. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It is a joy. I'm looking forward to this conversation. And I think one of the things about building a culture of life in our society is just creating a culture where human life, human opinions, human people are just respected, and you can have this free exchange of thoughts and ideas. And I think we see that under attack. So I want to get to that a little bit later in the show. But first, let's just go ahead and begin with your story. Where'd you grow up? We mentioned the Pacific Northwest, but I'd love to hear more. Tell us a little bit about your faith journey, your family, and then how you found yourself at the Institute of American Constitutional Thought and Leadership at the University of Toledo.
Certainly. So, yes, I grew up on Puget Sound on an island called Bainbridge Island, which is a half-hour ferry ride from Seattle. My dad worked in Seattle throughout my whole childhood. It's a nice little place. It's still there. My brother still lives there. So yeah, I spent the first 20 years of my life. I went to a couple colleges in in Washington State before I made my way to St. John's in Annapolis. But I bounced around for a little bit trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and realized that there were all sorts of resources in the Western tradition that I just had never really been exposed to. I had a great public education, actually, on the island, but I ran into one of those situations where the more I learned, the more I realized I still needed to learn. And so I started looking for a school that would immerse me in the great works of the Western tradition. And eventually, partly through the help of a Bulgarian expatriate who fled communism and ended up at the University of Washington, I found out about the great book school, St. John's in Annapolis. And so I called my parents and said, well,
you're going to go cross country.
Looks like I'm going east. So yeah, and while I was there, read everything from Homer to Heidegger. And that was also at St. John's was when my first serious interaction with Christianity started, because I was not really raised anything. I was kind of a nun, not a N-U-N nun, but an N-O-N-E nun.
This is going to be a longer show.
Yeah, right. No, buckle up. No, so I'd read the Bible and I was very interested in it. I used to watch a lot of documentaries, but I definitely was not Christian. And while I was at St. John's, we read a lot of the Bible. I read Aquinas, Augustine, Luther, Dante. And, one of the things I found is that my mind and my heart kept going back to those. So even after we moved into modern times, when we were studying modern philosophers, you mentioned Hume, people like that, I always kept coming back. And the image that was used once, Jaroslav Pelikan, who was a Lutheran, he's a historian of Christian doctrine, or was, who converted late in life to Eastern Orthodoxy, he said, well, I spent a lot of time circling the runway, and then eventually I came in for a landing. And it was the same thing. I would say at St. John's, I started circling the runway, but I actually did not enter the church until I was teaching at the University of Dallas a couple years in. So the whole time I was at Boston College, you made a crack about Jesuits. And say, despite their best efforts, I maintained and increased my interest in Christianity. So I'd kind of read that stuff on the side. I'd find Knights of Columbus pamphlets about things. And I just kept going back to it. And then eventually, in 2011, my wife and I, around the time that our third child was on the way, we entered the church. And actually, he was the first of the family to enter the church. I was baptized Lutheran. So my first son, Thomas, was baptized before we were actually fully received into the church. So he's actually the first Catholic in the family.
That's awesome. Well, for the record, for all the Jesuits listening to the show, I just want to say, having been in seminary, experiencing the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius, I love the Jesuits, and I love their ability to help us discern the good and evil spirits in our lives. So just want to say that. And your conversion story kind of reminds me a little bit of Ignatius kind of reading the Golden Legend and, learning about the saints and keep going back to that. And that's where he experienced kind of peace. And it wasn't reading about, the knights and them fighting for glory, but it was reading about the saints. And he's like, I can be one of those, And so he began that journey to sainthood himself. So where did you meet your wife along the way then?
So we met at Boston College in grad school. So she started the year before I did. And so we were both in the political science department. We were both studying the history of political philosophy. And so that's where I met her. And she got a job before I did, and then I got the job at the University of Dallas, and so I started at UD in 2008.
Fantastic.
That was the same year our first child was born.
And I think I remember a little bit of the story, but did you have to win her over at first sight, or how did that kind of work out?
Yeah, it took a little bit. It was about a year and a half there. I had to convince her, had to take on a lot of student loan debt in order to get in the room with her, but in the end it worked.
Well, praise God it did. Yeah. 6 beautiful children later, so it all works out. Well, tell us about the American Constitutional Thought and Leadership. What what is it, and why is it important? What drew you to Northwest Ohio to take this position?
Yeah. So the I know it's a mouthful. The Institute of American Constitutional Thought and Leadership, YACTL. I mean, there isn't even a proper acronym for it. So I just call it the Institute.
Yes.
So the Institute is one of 5 civic centers that were created by the Ohio General Assembly in 2023 in an effort to address primarily the crisis of civic ignorance and incivility, but also the sense of a lack of true intellectual diversity within universities. So there's a civic mission, but there's also a broader mission to it, which is just to expand the range of voices and the range of courses talking about fundamentally important questions so that undergraduates in Ohio can be exposed to great books, big questions, and at the same time come to appropriate their own constitutional heritage. And so the Institute is a school within a school. It's independently funded by the legislature. It's dedicated to recovering the American and Ohio constitutional traditions, but also to place those traditions within the broader debates of the Western tradition that they emerged from out of. And we were the first of the 5 to get started. And, at the core of our mission is this sense that self-government, our country is founded on the principle of self-government, but self-government's not something that just sort of happens. So it requires citizens to be formed, right? Credentials are not enough. You really need to be formed in the principles of the Republic, and in the debates about them. So we're trying to supply that basic civic formation by having students read the best that's been written, learn how to articulate themselves, to discuss, to disagree. And we're there for every student at the University of Toledo. But we also have a certificate. We have 2 minors. We're on track for our constitutional studies major to launch this coming fall. We have a study abroad program in Oxford that this will already be year 2 this summer. So we had our first one last summer. And we have lots of public events. But we're also actively involved in helping to form and provide professional development for K through 12 teachers who focus on American history, civics, and government. Because civic formation problems start early, and we're here to try to help at every level.
Yeah. So what's your website, or where can people find more information? I just get the feeling that people listening will be like, oh, this sounds really cool. Yeah. So where can they go to kind of learn more about it?
Yeah. So if you go to utoledo.edu, it'd be /institute/constitution, or it might be the other way around. I have trouble, but if you just Google the Institute of American Constitutional Thought and Leadership, it'll take you right to the University of Toledo. You can also go to Lead Toledo or at Lead Toledo. That's our tag.
Okay, great. Yeah. No, it sounds awesome, first of all, and it makes me want to be an undergraduate student again. But tell us a little bit about, you mentioned the lecture series. I did see online, I wasn't able to attend. I was at a conference in Cleveland, but you had some great social media ads even talking about, Trump, and that name just elicits, you love him or you hate him, whatever it might be. But you talked about whether he was good or bad for higher education. You also had another presentation on, is liberty still relevant? And then you have another public lecture upcoming on communist constitutionalism. Yeah. I'd love to talk about what does that even mean. Yep, but tell us about this series and, what is the kind of aim of those series? Yeah. So our public events are aimed both at students, but also at the broader community, Northwest Ohio. And so we have every fall, we have a Constitution Day lecture. We have other lectures, the Trump debate that you mentioned. We have a debate each semester. So last semester we had a debate about physician-assisted suicide, pro and con. Yeah. And the Trump debate, it's kind of funny. Is Trump good for higher education as a question? There are a lot of people that think they know the answer to that question. Is Trump good for higher education? For a lot of people, that's like asking, are bulls good for china shops? And for other people, it's like asking, are wrecking balls good for condemned buildings? So there are a lot of people already have their mind made up about this, but there are real questions there. And this is a time when, the Trump administration has been putting a lot of pressure on higher education. And it's at a time when
Universities and colleges have lost a lot of trust among the public. There are a lot of more people who are openly skeptical about whether it's even worth it to go to university. So it's an important debate to have. And we had Nadine Strawson, who's a former president of the ACLU, and we had Steve Hayward, who's at the Pepperdine School of Public Policy. He'd also been at the Berkeley Law School, and they had a very good and civil set of disagreements and agreements about that issue.
Gosh, it's just so important because there's almost no room for nuance in our modern political culture. I mean, even look at the immigration issue, and people just are. It's either one way or another, or you look at the war that was just launched in Iran. It's if your guy's in office, it's a good thing. If your guy isn't in office, it's not a good thing. I mean, for us as Catholics, we have some principles that we can follow no matter who's kind of in office, that we can call out the good, the bad, and the ugly, depending upon who's there. But just that ability to communicate, it is communication that leads to communion at the end of the day. And we have to live with each other. I mean, I've got people in my family, they as red as they come, and then as blue as they come as well. But we have to be able to live together. Otherwise, we're going to run into some issues, and I want to get to that in a little bit as well. But maybe we can spend a little bit of time talking about just our nation's founding documents. Why is it important for citizens to spend time studying, understanding, appreciating the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States? Especially, I mean, we're celebrating 250 years as a nation. Maybe this is a good time for all of us to return to those foundational documents to realize just how amazing and providential they really are.
Indeed, yeah. And actually, I have a quotation for you from Ohio's first constitutions. That would have been, I think, 1803, where it says, "A frequent recurrence to the fundamental principles of civil government is absolutely necessary to preserve the blessings of liberty." And that almost every early state constitution has that provision in it, this awareness that, especially if you're going to have a self-governing people, they have to have an understanding of the principles guiding them in that activity of self-government. Self-government isn't just a bunch of people sitting down in a room and spitballing, right? I mean, politics, it's a complicated business. Big things are at stake. There are always differing opinions, always differing interests. And a free people has to understand what are the principles that are going to make it possible for us to get together as a community instead of just as a bunch of competitors or opponents, and work together to discover and to foster the common good. And so, this is a problem that the founding generation was intimately aware of. And as they went about their task, I mean, obviously they had day-to-day political responsibilities, there were compromises, but there was a clear set of principles that guided them in all of their actions. So they weren't just making it up as they went along. They weren't just doing what they felt like doing. They had rational precepts, really grounded in a certain understanding of natural law that guided them. Because if you look at the Declaration of Independence, I mean, it's a political document, as a person once said, it's the greatest country breakup song in history. But alongside that, it enunciates a set of first principles that's meant to guide any free people. It invokes the laws of nature and nature's God. It says that we are endowed with unalienable rights, among them life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, that government exists to secure those rights, that government gets its legitimate powers from the consent of the governed. Those are broad, not just political, but moral principles, and they provide a framework within which you can have the debates about what in particular you need your government to do. Should our legislature have one house or two? How many branches of government? Like, those are all really important design questions, but you're not going to get anywhere if you don't have some kind of engagement with the first principles that tell you what you should be doing and why it's important. And you find that all over the place in the founding. So the founding is a very rich tradition to draw from for thinking about the first principles of government. But it's also, one of the things I like to say about the Institute is we are both a small c conservative and a small l liberal institute. We are a small c conservative in the sense that we believe that there truly are things that you can learn from, not just about the principles of the founding. It's 250 years ago, but that doesn't mean it's dead and gone, right? Yeah. As Faulkner once said, the past isn't dead. It isn't even past, right? It's still with us. And permanent principles are permanent. They're still there. So we're small c conservative in the sense that we seek to help students to learn from the principles of the founding, but we're also small l liberal both in the sense that, our own tradition is a kind of liberal tradition. It's founded on the principles of individual liberty, of equality, right? Those are small L liberal principles. But also, we don't believe that the principles of the founding should somehow be embalmed and worshipped. I mean, they need to be critically engaged. The founders weren't necessarily always right. Things do change. And one of the great things about teaching primary texts is that the history of the United States is not a history of people singing the same song over and over again. There were serious disagreements about first principles going all the way back to the debate over slavery. Are we by nature equal or not? So in recovering our own tradition of constitutional self-government, we're taken right into the kind of engagement with first principles that's not just worshiping the past, but is actually helping us to think clearly about where we are and what should be guiding us and where we should be going.
It's so important because you have modern day crises we were talking about before the show. I mean, the COVID crisis, and you think about first principles as self-governance, and how quickly it was shocking to me how many people, how quickly just said, the government said stay in your homes, and everybody just kind of stayed in their homes. And that's...
I was in Texas at the time, so that's not entirely true, but anyways, go ahead.
Here in Ohio. Well, that would be a whole nother show, so maybe I should have gone down this rabbit hole. But it was an interesting point you made as well, because I think we have a tendency to look at our founding, and we either deify or we vilify the founders. And there's got to be room in our modern political discourse to kind of look at them with a critical lens, but also an admiring lens, to see the good that they did, just like our modern day politicians, to say, all right, well, President Trump, this is good Trump, this is bad Trump. It's not like everything they do was perfect or everything they did was absolutely wrong and everything.
No, I'll just say, aside from our Lord, you have never learned anything from a perfect person. Right. And you have to be able to appreciate, to weigh the good, to weigh the bad, to take the good, to leave behind the bad. And any impulse to simply vilify or worship a human being is going to short circuit your brain.
Yeah, amen. But I got to shout out the Blessed Virgin because she was sinless as well.
That's true. That's
just kidding. No, we do love the Blessed
Virgin. I'm a country political scientist, so I will not get into that theological debate. I will.
We'll have you back for another show.
Yeah, right.
That's good. All right. So our nation, though, and this gets to the heart, I think, of why I wanted to have you on as well. There's such a political divide that it almost seems like two people on the same campus could be living in different countries based upon the way that they see the world, what they feel is the truth, and so on. These opposing worldviews and our inability to agree to disagree at times, it's ramped up to a certain, whether it's political violence, we've seen Charlie Kirk, for example, lost his life. As a father to kids, and TPUSC, he went on public campuses, and it's supposed to be free debate and discussion. We've seen that real violence, though. How can we return to some basics as a nation and foster better dialogue for a more flourishing human society that I think we all deep down hopefully desire?
Yeah, no, that's the $1 million question. And, to start with, I think the important thing to point out is that the problem that we have today, and these kinds of problems, the problem is not disagreement. There's always been disagreement. Right? Even the Constitution was born out of disagreement between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. Our problem is the inability to tolerate and navigate disagreement. So, for example, rhetoric, the art of rhetoric, and we have a whole course on rhetoric as part of our offerings. The art of persuasion, this was considered a very high and important and civilizing art because persuasion is the alternative to force, right? When you can't get people to agree, you either try to persuade them, or at the end of the day, you have to, well, let's put it this way. When persuasion fails, usually something worse comes about. That's what we faced in the Civil War, was a point where we couldn't agree. And so the divide that we have right now is, I think that citizens have not really been taught to reason carefully together, to listen charitably, to argue honestly, even under situations where there are very high stakes. And so civic education is really a precondition for self-government. It's not a luxury good. And what we're witnessing right now is a lack of civic education. Now, there's only so much that you can do in a university classroom, right? I was doing the math in my head on the way here, and I was thinking, okay, so let's say somebody takes a course and let's say they spend 3 hours on homework. So, you know, you get maybe 6 hours a week. So you're getting their attention for maybe 5% of their waking hours. So there's only so much you can do in the classroom, but you have to start somewhere. And especially because the principles of the founding, they take time to uncover, to think about. And so starting at the university is the right place to start for recovering a broader civic education, but you also have to do what we are doing, which is taking that knowledge, that expertise, and finding ways to pass it on to K through 12 teachers, because the way to change the culture is by teaching the teachers. Those are the what, you know, there are a lot of people who don't go to college.
Yeah.
Right? There are a lot of people that go to college that are never going to be in one of my classrooms, right? So, but the more that you can help these teachers understand the importance of these documents, the principles of these documents, to help them to find ways to pass that on to their students, over time, that's the kind of change that could actually have an effect. And I am not underestimating how much we're up against.
Yeah.
Right. Because the incentives were all on the side of rage and partisanship. But you can't, you know, as St. Thomas More said, right, you can't just give up because the winds are bad, right? You gotta, you are where you are, and you got to do what you can. So.
Well, and if you're a parent out there, you are the primary educators of your kids. And so I think to take the responsibility seriously that we're called to raise our kids up for this next generation. And then I think that will spill over into, you know, our public education system and other places when we start raising our kids the way that we're called to kind of fundamentally. I like how you talked about the art of rhetoric and persuasion, so very important today. What's just your message as we close the show here? We got about maybe a minute left. You know, to people who have lost hope in higher education, who've lost hope to say, gosh, with the chasm between how far we are with right and left, like we're headed towards another civil war. Some people have written that we're experiencing a cold civil war. What brings you hope in the midst of all the challenges we're facing today?
So hope comes from not the knowledge that you're going to win, but the knowledge that you're fighting the good fight that you're here to fight. And so I think the message to people is, we are here, the Institute's here. The legislature has created institutes and civic centers at other places. You can find people out there that recognize that we have a serious problem in this country, and people who are working hard every day to make it better. So you're not alone. If you're worried about this, you're not alone. You got to go out and find the people that you can work with.
Jonathan, thank you so much. Tremendously appreciate the work that you're doing and just who you are as a person. I would feel very comfortable sending my kids to the Institute. They're 9, 7, 5, 3 and baby, so they got a few years. Okay. But one day, thank you so much for your work.
Keep eyes open.
And please go Google the Institute today. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.